Someone get this woman a mop. She clearly knows her way around 1 inch. The crowd of young, eager sailors in the training gymnasium snickered. They stood in loose formations, their gazes shifting between the source of the booming voice, Commander Thorne, and its quiet target. Thorne was a mountain of a man, his crisp uniform barely containing a physique honed by decades of martial discipline, his chest a billboard of ribbons and qualifications. Before them, a small puddle of water from a spilled canteen marred the gleaming polish of the training mats. The woman, a new administrative transfer named Anya Sharma, stood near it. She was unremarkable in every way: average height, hair pulled back in a severe regulation bun, her face a neutral mask. She didn't flinch. She didn't scowl. She simply watched as a recruit scurried to the janitor's closet and returned, presenting the mop to her with an embarrassed shrug. Thorne smirked, his arms crossed. But from the observation deck above, Admiral Hayes watched, his old eyes narrowing not on Thorne's bravado, but on the woman's stance. He saw something the commander, blinded by his own reflection in the polished floor, had missed. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type "quiet professional" in the comments below. Sharma took the mop. Her hands, which Thorne had implicitly dismissed as fit only for menial labor, closed around the wooden handle with a quiet finality. There was no sigh of indignation, no flicker of anger in her dark eyes. Her focus was absolute. The sailors, following Thorne's lead, saw a woman accepting her designated place. They saw submission. The Admiral saw something else entirely. He saw a grip that was perfectly balanced, a subtle shift in weight distribution that spoke of countless hours of training with a different kind of wooden shaft. He saw the way her eyes didn't just look at the puddle, but scanned the entire room in a fluid, almost subconscious threat assessment, cataloging exits, angles, and bodies. Commander Thorne, preening in the glow of his petty victory, began his lecture. "In my dojo," he boomed, gesturing to the training mats, "everyone has a role. Some of us are warriors. We train, we fight, we lead." He paused for effect, letting his words hang in the air like a thick fog of arrogance. "Others support the mission in other ways." He nodded toward Sharma, who was now moving the mop across the floor. Her movements were not the clumsy scrubbing of a novice, but a series of precise, economic arcs, each one perfectly executed with minimal wasted energy. The silence of her work was a stark contrast to the volume of his condescension. It was a silence that should have been a warning. Suddenly, the klaxons blared. Red lights bathed the gymnasium in a pulsating, urgent glow. A synthesized voice echoed from the speakers. "Active threat simulation initiated. This is a drill. Repeat, this is a drill." Before the last word had faded, the double doors at the far end of the gym burst open and two figures clad in padded red training gear charged in, brandishing blue training carbines. Chaos erupted. The young sailors, caught off guard, stumbled back. Commander Thorne, his lecture instantly forgotten, bellowed orders. "Flank them. Get cover. Engage." He moved to intercept the first assailant, his body shifting into a classic, almost theatrical martial arts stance. He was a black belt, a master of form and technique, and he flowed with a practiced grace. He disarmed the first role player with a complex wrist lock, a move that was elegant but took precious seconds. As he postured over his victory, the second assailant raised their carbine, a clear shot on the commander's exposed back. The word "bang," which would have signified a successful hit in the drill, was already forming on the role player's lips. But it never came out. There was only the sound of wood striking polymer and bone, a sharp, percussive crack that cut through the noise of the alarm. The entire room froze. Commander Thorne spun around, his face a mask of confusion. The second assailant was on the ground, clutching their wrist, the blue training rifle clattering several feet away. Standing over them was Anya Sharma. She held the mop, not like a cleaning tool, but like a bow staff, its wet end dripping a small, steady rhythm onto the mat. Her stance was low, balanced, and utterly lethal. She hadn't performed a flashy technique. It was a single, brutally efficient vertical strike, delivered with pinpoint precision to the assailant's wrist and weapon, followed by a swift, disabling jab to a pressure point in their shoulder. The entire sequence had taken less than a second. A deafening silence fell over the gymnasium, broken only by the hum of the emergency lights and the pained groan of the role player. The first assailant, seeing his partner neutralized, hesitated for a fatal moment. Sharma closed the distance in 2 silent steps, the mop handle a blur, and swept his feet out from under him. He landed with a heavy thud, the air driven from his lungs. She stood over them both, the mop held at a perfect ready position, her breathing slow and even. "Threats neutralized," she stated, her voice calm and devoid of any emotion. It wasn't a boast. It was a simple, technical report. Thorn just stared, his mouth agape. That's not possible," he whispered. From the observation deck, a single set of footsteps descended the metal stairs, each step echoing in the stunned silence of the gym. Admiral Hayes emerged onto the training floor, his face unreadable but his eyes fixed on Sharma. He walked past the groaning role players, past the shocked young sailors, and past the utterly dumbfounded Commander Thorn, stopping directly in front of the quiet woman holding the mop. He didn't look at the neutralized threats or the chaos of the drill. He looked at her. "Petty Officer Sharma," he said, his voice a low, gravelly tone that commanded instant respect. "Report." Sharma's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight straightening of the spine, a subtle squaring of the shoulders that spoke of years of ingrained discipline. "Sir," she replied, her voice still level. "Drill initiated. Hostiles entered. Commander Thorn engaged one. I engaged the second to protect the commander's flank. Both threats neutralized. Floor is secure." She delivered the after-action report with the clipped, professional cadence of a seasoned operator. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly, his gaze then falling to the mop still held expertly in her hands. A flicker of something, not amusement, but profound respect, crossed his face. He turned to his aide, a young lieutenant who had followed him down. "Lieutenant, pull up the service record for Petty Officer Anya Sharma. Read it aloud. All of it." The lieutenant fumbled with his data pad for a moment, unnerved by the sudden intensity of the situation. Commander Thorn, his face pale, finally found his voice, sputtering. "Admiral, with all due respect, she's an administrator, a yeoman." Admiral Hayes cut him off with a raised hand, a gesture that silenced him more effectively than a shout. "Read it, Lieutenant." The young officer's eyes widened as the file loaded onto the screen. He swallowed hard and began to read, his voice wavering slightly as he processed the information. "Sharma, Anya. Master Chief Petty Officer, retired. Re-enlisted under special provision, administrative duties. Last active command." He paused, his voice dropping in awe. "Naval Special Warfare Development Group." A collective gasp rippled through the sailors. "DevGru. SEAL Team 6. The Legends. The Ghosts." Thorn's face went from pale to ashen. The lieutenant continued, his voice growing stronger with each unbelievable detail. "Qualifications: Lead Breacher. Master Training Specialist. Close Quarters Combat. Expert ratings in over a dozen weapon systems, foreign and domestic. Combat deployments." He listed a series of classified operations in places that were nothing more than whispers and rumors to most of the people in that room. The list of commendations was even more staggering, a litany of valor and sacrifice, a silver star, 2 bronze stars with valor, a purple heart. The gym was so quiet you could hear the slow drip of water from the mop. The lieutenant finished reading, the final commendation hanging in the air like a sacred verse. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of shattered assumptions. Anya Sharma had not moved. She stood with the same quiet stillness she had possessed from the beginning, the mop held in her hands as if it were a rifle. Commander Thorn looked from the datapad to the woman he had just publicly humiliated. He saw her now not as an insignificant administrator, but as a warrior of a caliber he could barely comprehend. The arrogance that had defined him moments before had evaporated, replaced by a profound and humbling shame. Admiral Hayes stepped forward again, positioning himself directly in front of Sharma. He looked her in the eye, a silent communication passing between 2 seasoned veterans. Then, with a motion that was sharp and full of reverence, the admiral, a man who commanded fleets, snapped to the most rigid position of attention he had held in years and rendered a salute. It was not the casual gesture of a superior to a subordinate. It was the salute of one warrior acknowledging another, a sign of the deepest professional respect. "Master Chief," he said, his voice resonating with authority and contrition. Your expertise is noted. My apologies for my commander's lack of situational awareness. He then turned his gaze upon Thorn, and his eyes were chips of ice. Commander, he began, his voice dangerously low. You owe this sailor an apology. Then you will report to my office. We need to have a long discussion about the difference between a belt and a battlefield. The story of what became known as the Mop Incident spread through the naval base with the speed of a signal fire. It was whispered in chow halls, recounted in barracks, and shared on encrypted forums among service members. The narrative became a modern parable, a lesson passed from salty old chiefs to wide-eyed new recruits. It was a story about the danger of assumptions, about the quiet lethality that often hides behind an unassuming exterior. Commander Thorn underwent a visible transformation. The booming arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. His formal apology to Sharma was immediate and public, but the real change was in his actions. He disbanded the flashy, tournament-style martial arts program he had built and personally requested that Master Chief Sharma, a title he now used with the utmost respect, help him design a new hand-to-hand combat curriculum from the ground up. He had seen the vast gulf between his choreographed techniques and her brutal, combat-proven efficiency, and the lesson had been seared into his soul. He had learned that true competence doesn't require an audience. It only requires a threat. His respect for her was absolute, and he became her most dedicated student, shedding his ego like an old skin. The mop itself became an artifact of this legend. It was quietly removed from the janitor's closet and mounted on the wall of the newly redesigned training gymnasium, right next to the framed photos of decorated war heroes. A small, simple brass plaque was affixed beneath it, bearing a quote attributed to Sharma herself, spoken to Thorn during one of their first training sessions. Respect the tool, not the title. Months turned into a year. The naval base's unarmed combat training program, co-developed by Thorn and Sharma, became the new standard for the entire fleet. It was ruthlessly practical, stripped of all ceremony, and focused on one thing: effectiveness. Sailors who passed through the program were known for their calm demeanor under pressure and their quiet confidence. Commander Thorn now spoke of Sharma with a reverence usually reserved for founding fathers of the Navy, often starting his lessons for new classes by recounting the day he mistook a lioness for a lamb. He used his own humiliation as the program's foundational teaching tool, a powerful lesson in humility. Anya Sharma, for her part, remained unchanged. She deflected all praise, her focus always on the task at hand. She still performed her administrative duties with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. But now, when she walked through the base, sailors of all ranks would subtly straighten their posture, their eyes holding a new light of profound respect. They saw not just an administrator, but a living embodiment of the service's highest ideals, the quiet professional, the silent warrior who let their actions speak for them. Her presence was a constant reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the loudest. The legacy of that day was not in the story itself, but in the culture it changed. It wasn't about the public shaming of an arrogant officer or the dramatic reveal of a hidden hero. It was about the fundamental truth she demonstrated with a simple mop: that worth is not determined by the rank on your collar or the ribbons on your chest, but by the competence in your hands and the steel in your spine. It was a lesson that rippled outwards, strengthening the core of the institution. New sailors learned to look beyond the surface, to value substance over style, and to understand that respect is something to be earned through action, not demanded through volume. The legend of the Master Chief with the mop became a part of the base's institutional DNA, a story told to remind everyone that a warrior's spirit is not defined by their current assignment, but by their unwavering commitment to a standard of excellence that needs no announcement. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a record book. It's the standard of quiet competence that continues forward in those you inspire. For more stories where silent skill triumphs over loud assumption and where professional competence defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.